God, most merciful, ever merciful, and may God's peace and blessings be upon His holy Prophet Muhammad and the purified members of his household and progeny.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So first of all, let me start by thanking you to have extended the invitation for me to come and join you guys in this beautiful camp. I've never been here, so this is new to me, and we got lost, so thank you for finding us on the road. I think that the idea of the camp that you guys have, first of all, is extremely important. So I start by commending you on just going ahead with these ideas and keeping them alive and bringing people together, especially in the way that you guys are doing it. The Scouts is extremely important work that you guys are doing in the context that we have, in the city, in this country, in this world that we have. You guys are actually doing very important work. And I think that the topic that I was asked to address, which is leadership and the youth, is perhaps, if not the most important topic right now, definitely one of the most important. So my idea right now was not really to give a very lengthy sermon and long, complicated discussion about leadership and the youth. The idea was more to give a few general principles that, inshallah, can become seeds for a good discussion afterwards, if possible, maybe a little bit of a discussion, a little bit of a Q&A. And hopefully the idea is that the fruits of this, the output, the products of this, is that you take something back and you make something practical out of it. You actually get a very concrete output, something that you apply in your lives when you go back, something that you keep in your mind and that you can go back to and think about from time to time and apply in your lives. So that's the idea. The idea is not to go into a very lengthy discussion about leadership and the youth. In our religion, the idea of action is extremely important. And this is going to be the main theme of today's talk. This idea of action and social action. We know in our religion, perhaps the thing that is considered to be the most important is our belief system. Every time, if we go back to the Holy Quran, every time we see that the Holy Quran makes a mention of faith, of our belief, it does not mention it without talking about action. Every time, and you will notice when you read the Quran, from the smallest chapters, the smallest verses of the Quran, to the most complicated and long ones, every time it says, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, those who have believed, those who have faith, وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, from the beginning of the Quran to the end. In our religion, faith, having a belief system, having a value system, knowing what's right and wrong, without action is considered incomplete. The moment you know something, the moment you believe in something, it must lead to action. And on the other side, just acting, just doing good without having the proper belief system is not enough. And that's why we are lucky and we are proud and we're lucky to have this kind of belief system that we have, because it gives meaning to our action. When I do good because I have this entire system of beliefs and values that makes me want to do that good and makes me want to do even more good. So that's as a starting point. In our religion, generally speaking, the idea of faith, the idea of belief, the idea of values and knowing right and wrong does not stand on its own without action, without doing something about it, without taking action, doing something. And on the other side, action on its own is not enough without the right belief system, without having the right values which give meaning to every action I do. Why do I do what I do? Maybe I'm doing what I do just so that people see me. That's one reason why I do it. Maybe I do it to have a better reputation. Maybe I do it to have more money. Or maybe I do it because I believe in what is good. I believe in what is just. And I am ready to put in the work, put in my energy, put in my time, put in my effort, my money, because I believe in something. And that belief is more important than the things I'm putting in. It gives it value and it gives it meaning. So that's the first point, just to keep in mind. The second point to keep in mind is that once we know that it's important to do something, once we believe to do something, where do we start? There is so much to do. So where do I start? What am I supposed to do? Can I just start, pick and choose anything I feel like doing and call it, this is my good action, and I just start doing? So in our system and in our belief and in our religion, and we're lucky that way, that our religion has looked at every angle and every need that we have in our lives and has tried to address it in one way or another. In our belief system, everything starts from this notion of knowledge. So before I jump into action, I need a little bit of knowledge. And inshallah, we'll talk about a hadith that's going to give us the map for this knowledge. But before going into the hadith, let's just talk about knowledge for a second. The way knowledge is used in our religion can mean different things. So we're going to talk about two different ways of distinguishing knowledge. The first one is going to be the distinction between religious knowledge and non-religious knowledge. That's one distinction. The second one is knowledge in theory, so knowledge that we use in our mind, knowledge that we build upon, but it's all in our head, and another kind of knowledge that translates into action. And this one is a spiritual knowledge. Okay? So keep those two distinctions in mind. We're going to get back to them. Let's start with the first one. Before I do any action, I have to know what's my reason for doing that action. Especially for us as believers. We are always asked to act with wisdom. We are asked to take our time to properly see what is the reason why I do what I do. I cannot do it just based on pure emotion, pure passion, reactively, without thinking of the consequences. That's not acceptable for us. We're always asked to think about it properly. In the context that we're talking about, this means that I live in a society, I live in a community, and I notice all these problems. I notice all these crises, all these issues that are always around us all the time. Yesterday I was listening to the news and they were saying that the month of June that we just had was the hottest month of June that has ever been recorded since the time they've been taking down the temperatures in history. And the reason is, of course, the effects that we are having on the planet. So we know that human beings currently have an effect on the environment. That's a huge issue, and in fact, it's not one issue. It's a lot of issues combined together that we call the environment, or ecology, or nature, or the planet. Okay, that's one type of problem we have. We have problems of homelessness. We have problems of people consuming drugs. We have people who do not have access to medicine and health. We have problems of people not having access to education. And then we will look within our own communities, let's say here in Ottawa, in our own communities, we all know of all sorts of problems and crises too. So where am I supposed to start? What am I supposed to do? And how do I tackle all of these? Which one do I pick and choose? Is it based on my passion? Is it based on my interest? How do I choose? And this is why we're saying, let's start with knowledge. So what does knowledge give us? The first thing that we want to do is, as we said, we're going to distinguish between a knowledge that is religious and a knowledge that's non-religious. And both are extremely important. Why do we need the religious knowledge? What I want from the religious knowledge is that I want to understand the spirit of my religion. What does Islam generally say about these ideas, about these problems, about these topics? So how do I learn that? I learn that by understanding the Holy Quran and perhaps easier than the Holy Quran, understanding the lives of Ahlul Bayt, studying their history, studying the lives of the prophets. This gives us very concrete things that we can hear and see and touch and feel and understand because they're day-to-day lives. We understand what kinds of issues they dealt with, what kinds of problems they faced, and how they dealt with them. So what we want to understand from the religious knowledge in order to act is to understand the general spirit of religion. In order for me to know what's my position in this kind of situation, what should be my position in this kind of problem. Of course, it may not be written black on white, but if I understand enough about my religion, I will generally know what's expected of me. Which side am I supposed to be leaning more towards? Which side is more towards the good? Which side is more towards the just? And if I find myself in situations where I can't determine that, it means I need to go back and do a little bit more research. This is what I'm trying to get from the religious knowledge. I need to understand the spirit of my religion and be able to apply it in my daily life. So this is something that we can park for now. Keep it in mind. One reason why we want to educate ourselves. Keep that in mind. As we said, we're going to go back to a hadith from Imam Ali alayhi salam that's going to give us the path for all of this, the map. The second type of knowledge that we need is that if I want to tackle anything happening around me, I have to have knowledge about it. And in a lot of these cases, because of the world that we live in, every day it's more complex. Every day it's more sophisticated. Every single topic, every single problem, every single issue that I face in society, there's probably an entire field of people in university studying it. And maybe there's more than one. If you take the environment, for instance, there's a lot of fields and a lot of experts who are spending their entire lives studying this, coming together for each one of these problems. So before I tackle any of these issues, I have to inform myself religiously, but I also have to inform myself based on what the expert science in that field says to me. If I want to tackle homelessness in Ottawa, if I want to tackle the economic or financial problems we have as a community, I have to spend a little bit of time understanding the problem itself. What do the experts say about this? Let's say I have a problem happening in the city of Ottawa and I want to decide which side am I supposed to lean more on. I have to spend a little bit of time looking into papers, listening to the radio, understanding who's who in Ottawa, who holds the cards, who has the power, who has the influence, who do I talk to, so that once I do my action, I understand what's harmful, what's beneficial. Where I put my energy and where maybe, as they say sometimes in the business world, they say, here are alligators, here are mines. You know, you don't jump in that blindly. You have to watch out here. There are people who are going to attack you the moment you talk about this. Even though it's a good thing, it attacks their interests. Think about it. So before I jump into action, I have to be smart about it. I have to study the topic and see what the experts on all sides say about it. So now I've educated myself religiously and I've educated myself based on what the experts say. That's one distinction of knowledge. The second one, we said, is the distinction that we make between what we said is theoretical knowledge. So sometimes I explain, like I'm doing right now, this is theory. This is theoretical. This is things that you absorb with your mind. And then there's another kind of knowledge that is very important in our faith, in our religion, which is referred to as a spiritual kind of knowledge. It's ta'deeb. And sometimes it's translated as training or instructing. Okay, but the reality is this is a spiritual kind of knowledge that you apply in your daily life. Why is this important? Because once I understood, once I know what I'm supposed to do mentally, theoretically, now I have to look inside myself and see why am I going to do what I'm about to do. Am I going to do it for the right reasons or not? Am I going to do it because I believe in the good, because I think it helps humanity or not? And this is important because in our faith, we believe that our blessing When I do an action as a human being, my action is limited to me. But sometimes you see a human being doing something and their action goes so far and it reaches so many people and it has so much impact, much more than what one person should be able to do. And this is the blessing part that we don't really control. This is the circumstances that we don't really know. Someone may put in a lot of money and effort and energy and nothing happens. And another person does it, they do it with sincerity, they do it for the right reasons, not with as much money, not with as much effort, not with as many people, and yet suddenly this grows into something magnificent and big and influential in society. This is the part that we can't control as human beings. As an individual, you can't control that. This comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And a lot of this comes from the second type of knowledge, which is the guidance that you get if you are doing it for the right reasons. Okay? So this is the first distinction that we made between knowledge that is in theory, knowledge that is in practice, and knowledge that is religious, and knowledge that is expert knowledge. Why is all of this important? Let's go back to the hadith that we promised we would look at. There's a hadith in Nahj al-Balagha, a very quick word on Nahj al-Balagha. This is a book that was put together by one of our scholars, Sharif al-Radi, one of our biggest scholars, who was also an expert in rhetoric and eloquence and the beauty of the language, Arabic language. And so he went through all the books that he could find where there were sayings and writings from Imam Ali alayhi salam. He looked at all of them and he took out what he considered to be the most beautiful ones, the most eloquent ones, and he put them in order in one book. He chose from them. He didn't put everything. He chose from them sermons, so these are long speeches from Imam Ali alayhi salam. He found the letters, a lot of the letters of the Imam, he put them as a second volume. And in the third volume, he kept the short sayings of the Imam. Some of them are 2-3 words long. They're beautiful to learn by heart. We can live our lives based on these short sayings. This is the third part of Nahj al-Balagha. There's about 480 short sayings. Some of them are a line long, a line and a half long, nothing more. And the majority are even shorter. So I invite you to look into it. There's a saying in there that talks about this topic of leadership and action in society. And so this becomes, keep everything we said in mind, and to me, when I'm asked about what am I supposed to do, how am I supposed to act, this is my map to start with. The Imam alayhi salam says, if someone wants to place himself in a position of leadership in society over other people, then there are 3 things that they have to keep in mind. The first one is Man nasaba nafsahu lin-nasi imama. This is how it starts in Arabic. Then there's 3 things to keep in mind. They should respect 3 things. The first one of these is the Imam wants this person to educate themselves first. Before I go trying to impose my education on other people, I have to start with myself. It's a lot easier for people to learn from your actions than to learn from your words. If I want to have an impact in society, before I start preaching to people, before I start lecturing, before I start giving sermons and teaching, I have to change my behavior. So that when people see my behavior, they say, oh, this is a Muslim because this is how Muslims behave. And this is something that we were taught by all of our imams. When we study the life of the Holy Prophet, we see that his greatest impact was not teaching people in theory, it was in his actions. When he would go to his enemies and he would treat them with humanity and kindness. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, be inviters to us, invite people to us without your words, without your tongues. So what's left? What's left is our behavior. We have to act in a certain way. There's another narration from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. He says, act in a way so that when people see your behavior, they say, these are the followers of Ja'far bin Muhammad. These are the followers of the 6th Imam, Imam Sadiq. So there's an expectation of us to behave in a certain way. conduct before tongue. 1. 2. Change your behavior so that people learn from you before you teach them, without theory. That's the second one. And the third one, بتعليم نفسه قبل تعليم غيره. First of all, he teaches himself before he teaches others. The second one is بسيرته. Okay, so in your conduct before your tongue. And the third one, and the Imam insists on this, is and someone who has taught himself is more worthy of esteem. أحق بالتجليل. التجليل is high respect and esteem. They're more worthy of that than someone who's teaching others. This becomes our map. There's an education, so anyone who wants to teach people, they have to start by teaching themselves, changing their conduct, and teaching people with their conduct, not with their tongue. This becomes a map for us. Now let's quickly go into the next topic. The next topic, and I'll go faster, I know the mosquitoes are eating all of us. The next topic is, when we keep all of this in mind, this is going to create a little bit of a dilemma for a lot of us. What's the dilemma? On one side, we're going to have people who want to jump into action without having enough knowledge. And that's a big problem we have. You don't know what's the right and wrong. You don't know what's the impact of doing this or not doing that, and yet you still jump into action. And sometimes you cause more harm than good because you didn't get enough knowledge, external knowledge, 1, religious knowledge, 2, and you haven't looked really at the sincerity of your action, 3. And on the opposite side, so this is good. It's good to be cautious. It's good to take time to understand. It's good to take time to educate ourselves. But on the other side, and this is a trend that we find in a lot of very religious people, very educated people, you become paralyzed because you're waiting for the perfect conditions to act. I'm waiting to get perfect knowledge about this situation or the crisis or the issue. Maybe there's more to find out. Maybe there's one more article to read. Maybe there's one more interview or documentary to watch before I do something about it. Maybe I'm not 100% sure of my intentions. I need to take a step back and wait until I'm perfectly 100% confident that I'm doing it for the right reasons and I have full knowledge of the situation. The problem is, in this world, perfection doesn't exist. And this is the other extreme. So it's a problem when people jump into action without knowing enough, but it's also a problem when people become paralyzed and don't act because they're waiting for the perfect conditions. The perfect conditions do not exist in this world. So what you have to find is the good enough. You have to try to be masterful. You have to do it in the best way you can. You cannot be paralyzed by wanting to get to perfection. And this is something we feel in some of the verses of the Quran. For instance, there's a verse that says, وَقُلْ اعْمَلُوا. And say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling the Holy Prophet, tell the believers, act. And say, O Muhammad, say, act. Do. فَسَيَرَ اللَّهُ عَمَلَكُمْ وَرَسُولُهُ وَالْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Then Allah will see your deeds, and His Prophet and the believers. This is a call to action. This is a call not to wait until you get the perfect conditions. Good enough is good enough. You have acquired the knowledge. You do have a general understanding of the spirit of your religion. You have looked into the sincerity of what you're about to do. If this is good enough, act. It is as though the verse is telling you Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Holy Prophet and the Imams, including the Imam of our time, they're waiting to see what you're going to do. وَقُلْ اعْمَلُوا فَسَيَرَ اللَّهُ عَمَلَكُمْ وَرَسُولُهُ وَالْمُؤْمِنِينَ. There's a call to action. And this is a huge problem that we have. When we look at our societies and when we look at our communities, in a lot of cases, there's a leadership that's missing. The leadership that's missing is that when you go, let's say, in a community, you see that when people, let's say, come to a mosque, they come to the mosque as though they are guests in that mosque. So I come and I sit and you're there, there's a committee, there's an organization committee, there's someone who's doing work, well, serve me. Present to me your program. Give me the food that you prepared, and that's it. And I may sit back and criticize, say, oh, this was good, this was not so good, and I go home. I'm passive. I do nothing on myself. I sit back as though I'm a guest in my own community, as though I'm a guest in my own mosque. I sit back and I wait for things to happen to me, and I give an opinion maybe about them. That's one way to be. But this is not leadership. Leadership is following what the verse is saying. You need to act. We are not guests in our community. We are the community. We have to do the action ourselves. The mosque is my mosque. I'm not going there as a guest. Whatever I notice in the mosque, I take action. Of course, I don't do anything willy-nilly, jump into action, cause problems. There's a proper way to do it. But if I notice a gap, I notice a problem, I notice an issue, I cannot just ignore it and say, well, it has nothing to do with me. I'm a guest here. I come, I look what's around, things are presented to me, and I go back home. This applies to our programs. I come to a majlis, I have to be a participant in the majlis. I come to a mosque, I have to be a participant in the mosque. I have a community, I have to be a participant in the community. Things don't just happen to me and I sit back and I watch them passively. I act. So this word of activism, this is where it comes from. You are either active or you're passive. You're either doing the action or the action is being done to you. So you have to decide. Do you take a role of action and leadership, or do you become passive? And this becomes a habit and a way of life for you. If you're going to become one of those people who are passive, then your entire life you're waiting for it to happen to you. If you want to play an active role in your life, you want to own your life, then you play an active role. You determine your life and you take actions. You don't wait for your life to happen to you. Then you're not allowed to decide to say, this was good and this was bad. You didn't do anything about it. You have no say and you contributed nothing. You didn't participate. Things were just happening to you. This work of acting, this work of taking action, when it's combined with everything we said before, which is now you have an understanding of your religion. You have an understanding of the spirit of Islam. And you have an understanding of how the world works. And if you looked at the sincerity of your actions and you know that you're doing it for the right reasons, this, whatever step you're going to make now, if it's aligned with this, is considered a sacred step. This is holy work, whatever it is. This is the work of the prophets. Because the steps you're making are steps going in the direction of the good. They're steps that are going in the direction of the just. You're building a better life for other human beings. For yourself, for your family, for your community, and for humanity. This is the work of the prophets, to establish justice on earth. Whatever steps you make in that direction, they are considered holy. They're considered sacred. You're doing the same work as the prophets are doing. So this is where we link it back and we start understanding the importance of these little things that look like they're social work. We think about, we should do something about homelessness, or we should do something about the environment. It may look simple. It may look, it's very easy. It's just something I think about because it's a problem. It's actually very important work, and it's work that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala considers to be sacred. And the verses that talk about that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala distinguishes between those, He puts one group of people together and He says, there are the prophets, the messengers, and those who establish justice. That's it. That's the only condition to be in that group. There are the prophets, the messengers, and those who establish justice, and those who are against them. The Holy Quran puts these two categories. You're either with the prophets and messengers, and then your end will be their end, and you end up being with them in the afterlife, or the work that you do falls in the other category, which is against those people. Okay. Now, the last topic is the link between all of this and the youth. So there's a few things to mention here. The link that I wanted to make is, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So how do we decide where do we start? We mentioned a number of these issues and crises and social problems that we encounter. Where do we start? Our religion always tells us to start from what's closest to us. And that's why we said in this hadith, you start with yourself. And then you get your house in order. You start with your family. And then you start with your community. Before I go try to fix the political problems in Zimbabwe, I have to look at what's going on in my community here, in this city, in this mosque, in this little group. What are the issues that we're facing? What are some of the problems that don't seem to being resolved quickly? What can I do to contribute? Our religion always tells us, start small and start with what's closest to you and build on that. So that there's no excuse that I can't change the world. Of course you can't change the world if you look at the whole world with all of its problems. But you can change yourself, and you can probably influence a lot in your family, and you can probably have a huge impact in your community, and then eventually you can probably have a huge impact on the city you live in, or the country you live in, and the world you live in. You decide how to do that. You start from what's closest. One of the biggest problems we have right now is the connection that we have with the youth. You guys, and so this is how, when you look at all the problems we have, you have to prioritize. And so how do we prioritize? Well, our religion is telling us, go for what's closest and what's more urgent and immediate. All of it is important, but dealing with the problems of the youth is probably more important than dealing with the environmental problems we have. So I go with the youth. Before I look at the political issues we have in some countries, and they're complex and they take a long time to understand, I know that some of our youth need someone to talk to. I know that some of the youth are going through a tough time trying to understand who they are and how they fit into this society or our community, and what it means for them to be a Muslim or to be a Shi'i or to be someone who's living in this city, in this time, in this country, and all of that. And so they have these struggles in their identity. Who am I? And how am I supposed to live? What's the right thing to do anyways? Who says that's right and that's wrong? Okay, so we know that we have issues. If we prioritize, this is one of the biggest issues. So if we keep in mind everything we said, let's wrap it up. What did we talk about? We talked about trying to balance between religious knowledge, expert, non-religious knowledge, and the sincerity of our actions. Sincerity is between you and your God. So let's not talk more about that. Now let's balance this idea of what does religion say versus the experts, the knowledge that we have today. What are some of the biggest issues that we have today when we look at the youth? So this is work that we have to do ourselves, and work that we have to help others with. So we have to educate ourselves about this, and then try to, once we find the answers to this, try to influence others on it. Some of the biggest issues we have today, and so I would encourage you, especially those of you who are about to do more studies, do more research, do more reading, trying to understand the issues about that. One of the biggest issues we have today with the youth is everything under the general heading of mental health. And I'm not going to go into any of these topics today. I'm just giving you 2 or 3 of them to hopefully give you kind of a map. If you want to do more work, if you want to do more research, if you want to help people or organizations doing Islamic work, doing activist work in society, in the community, these are areas that today we have an immediate need for them in the community. One of them is mental health. With the youth, people are having a lot of mental issues. They feel that their lives have lost meaning. They feel that they're crumbling under stress. They feel that they have no one to talk to. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done with anything that is related to mental health. That's one issue. A second issue, and I'm not going to go into too much detail here, the second issue is everything that falls under the heading of dependence or addiction. And I think all of us, we know that to some degrees we experience it too. Everybody has a cell phone, everybody has something that you're connected to, that you probably know that if you had a little bit less of it would be a good thing in your life. You're kind of connected to it and it may have some negative impacts or. It starts with these simple things. But if we understand what happens to a brain, or to ourselves when we're dependent on something, whether it's a social media app, whether it's a cell phone, or whether it's a drug, or whether it's a habit. All of these are dependencies and addictions. If we understand what's happening to our brains and how hormones are released in our brains and how this is going to have a long-term impact on our lives, I think we can have a very positive influence on a lot of people in our lives just working with this idea. So something to keep in mind, a second topic. The third topic is anything and everything related to gender issues. Today, it's a huge topic. We need to understand what Islam says about them. We need to understand what the experts are saying about them and come up with a balanced solution to a lot of these issues that are coming up related to gender issues in general. What are women and what are men, and how are they supposed to play a role in these societies? And are these nature or nurture? Do you develop your gender or are you born with it? Is it biological or is it determined as what you choose in your life? There is a lot of more and more Islamic literature on this. This is another area that I would think it's good for us to educate ourselves about, and then we can help others about. Especially for you guys who are always in these positions of leadership. You're in positions where the point of being in things like Scouts is to play this social activist role. Well, if you open that door, if you tell people, I can help you with this, I assure you there are people who are going to come. Not everybody's going to come right away, but there will be people who are going to say, I need help. Okay? The last thing has to do, the last point, and I will finish with this. The last point I wanted to mention has to do with prevention. So before I talk about people, these problems that I mentioned are usually arising with people who are reaching a certain point as teenagers and beyond. But at this point, I'm playing catch up. I'm reacting to a reality. Where I think you guys can make a huge impact and a huge difference is never to let the situation get there in the first place by doing preventive work. This preventive work is where you can play a role right now with people who are younger than that age. These people need role models, and these people need to be treated Islamically. So, 3 or 4 quick points on how to treat the young Islamically. Very quickly. First point, we are supposed to shower children and the young. We're supposed to shower them, inundate them, make them feel like they're drowning in love. This is Islamic. These are Islamic principles of teaching. We're told in some of the narrations, the Holy Prophet, he would sit and he would have his grandchildren, Imam Hassan and Hussein, he would kiss them, and he would not stop kissing them. And they say a man came to the Prophet, and when he saw, these are nomad Arabs who lived in a very difficult, harsh environment in the desert, so they would come to the city and they would see things, they would consider them fluffy and mushy. And he saw the Holy Prophet doing this, and he didn't think this is, of course, the behavior of a messenger of God. This is divine, godly behavior. He looked at the Prophet and he told him, "O Muhammad, I swear to you that I have 10 boys, and that I have never kissed a single one of them my entire life." And the Holy Prophet responded. He told them, "What am I supposed to do with someone like you? It is as though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has removed the mercy from your heart." Okay, so this is maybe an extreme case, but the Holy Prophet is defending his behavior. He's sitting there just kissing his grandsons, his grandchildren, and he considers that a symbol, an indication of divine mercy. That's one. Another narration we have from the Holy Prophet. We're told that when the Holy Prophet was a messenger and more and more people started getting into Islam, a lot of people would bring their babies to the Holy Prophet to bless them, just to hold them and to read some verses of the Quran and to touch them. And they say there's this woman who brought her little tiny son to the Holy Prophet. So the Prophet sat him in his lap and he played a little bit with him and talked to him. And then the woman noticed that the little son peed on the Prophet. He urinated on the Prophet. So she insulted her son. Of course, she was extremely ashamed. This is the messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the greatest of his creation. And my son just peed on the Holy Prophet. And she insulted her son. The Holy Prophet said in Arabic, the word is meh. Meh in Arabic basically means be quiet. And it's rare for the Prophet to use this tone with someone. And yet he used it with that woman. When she insulted her son, he told her, be quiet or stop. What he has done may be removed with a bucket of water. And what you have said to him will never be removed from his heart until he dies. Today, there are entire fields about educating or upbringing or training or teaching our children. This is giving us an indication of how the Holy Prophet thinks about children. This is how he raises the children. Do not say a word to the child. This child is probably not even fully aware of what the mother said. He's too young. And the Prophet says this is going to remain in his heart until he dies. It's changing the relationship you have with that child from this age. And it's going to stay in there. Be careful how you deal with that child. Give priority to the right things. It's a little bit of urine, you can remove it with a bucket of water. Don't do more damage than that. Okay? So this is the love. This is a love principle. These are important principles of upbringing in Islam. Second one, the principle of respect. Islam shows us, the Holy Prophet shows us, that when he dealt with children, he dealt with them with respect. And this is different from love. Because you might love the child, but you don't treat them as though they have a full personality. You treat them as a child. And we have a lot of narrations, and probably the most popular one, the most important one or relevant one to this, is when the Holy Prophet would see a child, he goes down to their level, he bows down to say salam to the child. So the bowing down itself is a huge indication of respect. You don't talk to the child from the top. You go to their level and talk to them at their level. One. And two, the Holy Prophet, he's not wasting his time. He's actually saying the salam, the proper formal salam to the child. Imagine that kind of society when that child grows up. Do you not think that he's going to respect back that man who bowed down to him and that said salam to him when he is the most important man in that world? He's basically the equivalent of a prime minister and a president and a king all rolled up in one. He's ruling the Islamic world. And when he sees a child, this is how he treats them. So this is a principle of respect. The third principle, expose children to real life. The Holy Prophet never sheltered children from what's going on in the world. And we have a lot of instances of this. He made sure that Imam al-Hassan, Imam al-Hussein, Zainab, who was even younger than that, they were present in everyday life. I'm not putting a burden on the child by expecting them to understand all the nuances or showing them what's happening in detail. They don't need to become a political analyst at 3. But I also don't need to shelter them from everything going on. The child, as they're going through all of this, they develop an awareness. They develop a sensitivity, and they see how you conduct yourself in these situations. The child intuitively knows there are crises, these grown-ups are dealing with them, and he's looking at your behavior, your conduct. Are you patient or are you angry? Are you speaking with wisdom or do you lose your mind? Do you involve people or do you decide yourself? The child is learning. And this is why we said it's more important to teach with your conduct, not with your words. It's different than when I tell the child, come, I'm going to explain to you something, and when the child is just learning from you by watching you do. This is what has a lot more impact. People say, I want my children to pray at home. I want my children to read the Quran. Well, do you read the Quran? Do they see you reading the Quran? Do they see you praying? How much do they see you praying? If they don't see you praying, they're not going to pray. You can tell them all you want and they may listen a little bit, but after that, they want to see you do it. And then if you do it enough, you don't even need to tell them to do it. The child will come on their own beside you and do it. They will try to impress you by doing it. They will open the Quran on their own. They will pray on their own because they saw you do it, and in their eyes, you're the example and you're the role model with your action, not with your words. And this is what they're going to copy. The last thing that I wanted to mention here, there's a lot more, but let's skip it and wrap it up. All of this is based on a general principle that comes back again and again in a lot of different narrations that we have, that are always reminding us to split the age of a child when we bring them up into three groups of 7 years. And we have this in different narrations, in different analogies, different metaphors. One of them says, when you have a child and you're taking care of them and bringing them up, the first group of 7 years, so the first 7 years of their lives, they are or treat them as a king. And we're going to explain it in a second. The second 7 years of their life, so from about the time they're 7 to about 14, treat them like a servant. And the last 7 years of that 21 years, so now from about 14 to 21, treat them like a vizier. Why? What do we mean by that? So the Prophet or the Imams are telling us, the child from the age of 0 till the age of 7, treat them like a child. Let them play and make them feel like all of their needs are fulfilled. Because they're later going to feel that they had a childhood. And they're going to be trusting of the world they live in. And trusting of you that you will always meet their needs. So this applies to parents, but it applies to you. If you play a role with the youth, this is how you have to make them feel. A child under 7 must feel like they're like a king. It doesn't mean there's no discipline. But a king, when they have a wish, when they have a desire, when they have a need, it needs to be fulfilled. Well, that child, our religion says, don't put too much pressure on them. Make them feel like their needs are fulfilled until they're about 7. And of course, these numbers are not hard numbers. They're general principles. Some children are going to move a lot faster, a lot slower. Your context may be different. But generally speaking, first 7 years, they're a king. And then they're a servant. What do we mean by that? From the 7 years old to the 14 years old, this is when you're disciplining the child. When you're teaching them how they're supposed to be. When you're teaching them the etiquette and the manners and the manner in which they're supposed to conduct themselves. So you treat them as though they are a servant. You give commands, you give instructions, and they do. You have to teach them discipline. You have to teach them obedience. This is when it's done. Because the child has the maturity to understand what you're asking. And of course, this is not overnight. What you're expecting in a child at 7 is not the same as what you're expecting at 14. You evolve there. And once the child reaches this age of 14, then the riwayat, the narrations say, treat them like a vizier. A vizier is like an aide, right? You have the king, and you have this person that they seek their counsel and their advice on everything. So now the child is on your right all the time. You take them with you. You explain the world to them, and you make them feel that they're part of it. That they have a say. What do you think about this? You make them feel that they have the full personality now. That they are at your side. That you're going through life, through the difficulties of life, through everything that you're encountering with them by your side. Okay? So these are all based on this general idea of the 3 layers, the 3 groups of 7 years that we find in a lot of the narrations. Inshallah, this was beneficial. I'm completely open to questions, concerns, discussions. I know I dumped a lot of information on you. Inshallah, it's fruitful, and the point is not just for now. Inshallah, we have a good discussion now, but the idea is also that some of this maybe stays with you, and then you think about it and you see how it applies to your daily lives for you as individuals as well as people participating in these leadership roles that you play very important roles in our communities. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. So questions, concerns.